Howdy, y'all. It is Kimber Fox with Texas Pride Realty Group, brokered by Home Smart Stars. And we are here today on the Flee Red States podcast. And we are so excited to have Callen Jones with us. Callen, would you like to go ahead and say hi?
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
Um, so yeah, we have been doing this podcast for a few months now, and you are someone that we have really been wanting to have on here to just kind of like really hear from you what's happening in Florida right now. What are you seeing?
So, Florida is interesting. I think that there's a lot of overarching perceptions of Florida, but admittedly, like Equality Florida just announced that all of the anti-LGBT bills failed. So our state session, is ending and all of that was defeated. We actually have seen less this year. So Florida was one of the first states that kind of led the way really in 2023. But since then, we haven't seen as much that's egregious. Obviously, we have a lot of movement in real estate land. You know, we're all realtors, so I think we're seeing more questions about property taxes and insurance, especially after two major hurricanes last year. So there are so many pieces at play, and unfortunately, when you have we have a super majority in terms of a red state legislature, so we're not seeing a lot of movement in those other areas either, where people are saying, hey, we need help with this other stuff, on top of the identity-based things that we never know how that's going to play out.
Okay, so and two, we had mentioned previously on a podcast, Leslie was talking about insurance rates and how that's really pushing a lot of people out in certain areas. And so, one thing that I'm actually really interested in is what additional hurdles do you see for further marginalized people whenever it comes to, if they can't buy or sell their home because of this insurance now?
Absolutely. And that's a conversation we're having a lot, especially with the 55 plus community, because we have so many folks who retire to Florida, especially people who bought properties years ago, and then they're on a fixed income, or for whatever reason, their wages aren't increasing. What's happening is they're being priced out. But that doesn't, your inability to pay for your home doesn't mean that you can sell it. So if you look at all the national data right now, Florida is cool. So some of the states are still red. We are blue. Our inventory is way, way, way up. The reality is we appreciated, so I'm in the Tampa Bay area. We were on all of the top lists during COVID. So we had so many folks moving here, especially from high income areas. So we had the West Coast, we had the Northeast. And then what happened is we appreciated 26% in 1 year, but local wages don't go with that. So when properties appreciate, so do the taxes. And then the insurance obviously is going to follow. You add in things like hurricanes, you add in flood rates. Unfortunately, once we have disasters, all of those premiums go up, up, and up. The other thing that we see too is a lot of our insurance companies have gotten stricter because a few years ago, we had many roofing companies who were submitting huge amounts of roof claims. So what they did is they came back and they changed the rules. So most of our carriers won't even cover a roof over 15 years old. So what that
Wow.
means is, unfortunately for marginalized folks, especially folks who don't have that increase in, hey, how can I afford $15,000 to $20,000 out of pocket for a roof? Or how can I afford if my insurance quadruples? Because that's what we're seeing when you add in home insurance plus flood insurance, car insurance, any of those additional pieces are affecting marginalized folks the most. And as we know, there aren't options. It's not like they say, hey, we can see that you're struggling to afford this. Let us take that from you, or let us help you with that. It really is a struggle. And I have some folks right now that they want to move. Most of them are part of our community, but because of inventory, because of we have some price decreases, interest rates, all of it, we haven't been able to sell. So they're stuck kind of in that limbo because they can't afford to move until their property sells.
Yes. And I'm glad that you brought that up because just because you can't afford your home does not mean you can afford to sell it. And that is one thing that we have seen for a while now. I usually tell people, if you bought your home during COVID, because I'm in the Dallas Fort Worth area, I remember during COVID, people were giving away all kinds of contingencies. It was wild.
Correct.
Um, and now those people are struggling to even break even. And so one thing too, you mentioned flooding in Texas, especially. in like North Texas area, I've seen roofs be replaced that were 5 years old,
Mhm.
that were 3 years old,
Mhm.
because we just have a lot of wind damage here. Honestly, I'm surprised that they still cover roofs in Texas. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Um,
Put it on the list. We'll see what happens.
so, but yeah, so, as thank you for sharing with us about the insurance. I want to know more about what are you seeing whenever it comes to how people are acting boots on the ground. Do you think are you still seeing a lot of people that are trying to leave Florida and they don't even care if they have a home? They're just like, get me out of the state.
It's yes and, because we know that there's a lot of privilege that goes into those conversations. So boots on the ground, I will say that right now, I'm also the president of the only trans serving nonprofit in the Tampa Bay, and we are finally seeing allies actually say, I should probably do something, right? Because I think so long allyship was like, yeah, I got you. And now we're saying like, that really isn't getting us where we need to be. So boots on the ground, we're seeing way more people actually doing advocacy work. We're seeing in Florida, we had way more people go and do lobbying and try to talk to our state legislature. We have more people who are having conversations about what's needed, but there's a huge disproportionate level there, right? So we're seeing the people who have the ability to do that. We have lobby days and everything, but for us, for the LGBT community, it's right in the middle of the week. So you have to have a certain amount of privilege to be able to miss work for 3 days, afford a hotel, because our state capital is not near any of the blue areas. So those are some of the pieces with when we're talking about advocacy or things like that. We have seen people leave. I've helped multiple, especially trans and gender expansive people. They're really trying to figure out where to go, excuse me. In the past couple months, I've had 10 trans clients. Statistically, that's just improbable for one person to have that many trans clients all at once, but it tells you where we are. Some of them were able to leave. However, they're moving to higher cost areas. So in talking to some of those people who went to the Pacific Northwest and some other places, it's tough, and they haven't been able to secure housing or some other pieces. And then we have other folks who are waiting in that, hey, I can't leave until I have the funds. And we're in this limbo because they want to leave, but the houses aren't selling, or they're not selling for as much. And I can think of at least 5 conversations I've had where people are scared, and they know that in order to be successful in that next step, they need this much money, but we don't have that much money. To your point, Kimber, about people who purchased within the last few years, we really aren't at the place where that extra profit is as available as it was during COVID, where your market sounds like mine, where, I mean, you would throw out an offer and pay 30,000 over appraisal and write in the dog and anything else you wanted. And unfortunately, now those folks are not going to break even.
I want to back up just for a minute to the word ally.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean crap to me. I want accomplices. Like when you talk about allies, it's what they say.
Correct.
Accomplices march with us, vote with us, lobby with us, stand with us, and stand up for us. Allies, they go to our bars. They like drag queens. I don't
I
I don't
actually,
care about allies. I want an accomplice. You need to
I
be
actually
on the
use that
boots on
same
the ground with
language.
me.
I get it. I get it. So I mentioned the nonprofit. Our nonprofit is called Trans Network, and we are being recognized at the St. Pete Gala from Equality Florida. We're being recognized this year. And in our video, we said that same thing, that we don't need allies, we need accomplices, because I think so often people want the sticker or they want the Facebook banner. Because the other thing is, right, people equate ally to acceptance. Those aren't the same. It used to be there was tolerance, acceptance, ally, then we get into advocate, accomplice, but people have merged a lot of those to where, oh, I'm an ally, but they don't realize that allyship was never static. It was never passive. You always had to be willing to make yourself uncomfortable for the cause. I think we've seen though that allies don't show up. So that's why, Leslie, to your point, we're shifting language to claim new words saying, hey, allies, it ain't it, right? We need more, and we need you to actually put yourself in this conversation far more than you are. And I think so often people don't want it to affect them, right? I'll do enough up until it affects me without realizing that right now, trans folks, they don't have that option, right? There's a lot that's happening in the world that they don't get to just decide when their life is harder.
That's a really great point. Sorry, Bob, I know you're about to jump in. So, but that's a really great point because yeah, I mean, I'm so over allies in general or people like how Leslie's saying, and Callen, y'all are saying, we want accomplices. If you're not willing to use your body as a shield for someone that is more marginalized for yourself, and that's not just within the LGBTQ community, we're a bunch of white people sitting here. If we're not willing to put our bodies in front of Black and brown bodies, we are not true allies to those communities. Okay. And then when we look at the intersectionality of the LGBTQ community and the harm that's done, we need more than the rah. We need more than like, oh, pat on the back, good job, you shared that Facebook post. Those are the people that we really need the help from the most right now. And so thank you for pointing that out. And Bob, would you like to jump in?
Apologies for the technical difficulties. Thank you all for still running. I want to talk about when the water is too hot. And the conversation was people can't break even after only a few years of home ownership. They got to wait. And I acknowledge that. I have family issues that, kept me in place for a long time. I worry that when the water does get too hot, when the most draconian laws do get passed, which I have absolute, unfortunately, confidence in these states that they will pass the most draconian laws, because Audre Lorde teaches us that the final solution was not the first solution. And when you have 400, 500 bills at least brought before the legislature each term in each of our states, they will pass these first, second, and 15th solutions before they get to the final one. As we get to points where the water is too hot for the trans community, the LGBT, all the rest of and the intersection with the people of color communities, the BIPOC communities, when the water gets too hot, it will not matter that you're losing money on your house. If you can break even today and get out, is that better than waiting 2-3 years from now when you will lose money anyway? If we get into a market where LGBTQ people are forced to move, and we're all realtors, as a buyer's agent, you see that there are 2 guys' names on this deed, and they have to get out. Are you going to bid as much? If you see that Michelle is on the deed, but Michael is selling the house and they're dead naming, will you bid as much knowing that that person has to get out?
Well, and I
And
think
that's
that's to
my
the point.
fear, is that if I'm not trying to make everybody jump today, but it just, at some point, it's not about that. It's about your safety.
And that's to the point too that, the most marginalized in our community aren't homeowners. They don't even have the ability to become homeowners, right? So that's the other piece too, is when we talk about a lot of these pieces and we talk about how the intersections stack and how all of this plays out. I'm having those conversations with people right now, especially when there are multiple intersections. I have a client right now who is non-binary and Jewish, and some of the things that are being thrown at them specifically about being Jewish and specifically about, we're not going to say the things that have been said to them, right? But
Yeah.
some of the things that their pressure to try to leave the country and then looking at where do we go? How do we do that? What does that look like? It then becomes that paralysis of how do you even make a decision? This person's also a parent. And that's one thing that is very real for me as a parent to 2 little kids. Decisions are so much different when it's not just you and a partner able to go. I am in a co-parenting situation with an ex who's not willing to move. So in order for me to be a good parent, I don't have that flexibility to just say, I'm going to up and go somewhere else because I'm not willing to leave my kids behind and not be a present parent. So I think, Bob, to your point, when we look at a lot of these issues of how people are making these decisions, I at least am working with a lot of people who are leaving because they're not willing to wait and see what happens. Then there are other people who are saying, no, I actually live in an area where we have a pocket. So St. Pete is on a whole bunch of lists that it really is an LGBT pocket more than most of the state. Now, that doesn't protect us at the state level. That doesn't protect us at the national level. But I think that there are a lot of people who say, I'm good for now. The other thing that I'm hearing people say is the world has gotten so expensive that they're concerned, right? They can't even afford groceries. They can't afford gas. So the ability to think that they can get a job somewhere else and make all of those life transitions is hugely daunting.
Well, then let's talk about that for a second. There are a lot of places that are less expensive, and they're not in the US. Mexico, Spain, Portugal, parts of Ireland. There are places, I think we have this set of blinders on, and we only look at the 50 contiguous states, of which the least expensive states to live in are all red. And we can talk about the demographics and politics of that at some point, probably a different podcast, but it'd be interesting. But there are other places in this whole big globe that we don't think of because we feel like we have to stay in this little section. My family moved around a lot as a kid, so I'm not, tied so much to one region. There's certain parts of the country I absolutely love, but there's no thing for me as far as 3 generations back. My grandpappy, bought that farm sort of thing. I'm not stuck on the land. And one of the bloggers I follow talks about if you went to a restaurant and you had a horrible service and bad food, you would never go spend another dime in that restaurant. Okay. But if we live in a state that takes away our rights on every election, votes whether or not we are people, and does all these horrible things, we feel we have to keep shopping at that restaurant. We feel we have to stay and vote because there might be a blue wave at some point in one of these states where they're literally serving us the worst rights that we can have. And we feel we have to stay. And so I absolutely acknowledge there are family issues, there are children. I had a parent issue for many, many years. I honor that. I'm not trying to say that's wrong. I just want people to shake their head a little bit and go, wait, there are other places in other parts of this map that are less expensive, that have healthcare, that have civil rights, that don't care if I hold a man's hand, a woman's hand, anybody's hand, or no hand. They don't care. And we're not on the ballot every election. They're more worried about, real stuff.
And and I want to say, and I've said this before, the thought process of a lot of people's like, well, I can't get a job there, or I can't do that, or I don't have the skill level. Spain has a visa for 90 days. Looking for a job visa. They're the only country that offers this. For 90 days, you can just go and look for a job. The Netherlands, you want to wait tables, you want to work in the shop, they want you there. And they will give you good health care and a livable wage and maternity leave and free education, a free college education. Like people feel like, well, I don't have that degree or I don't have this ability. They can do it. Or they say, well, I run a small business. Well, you can many times you can run that small business unless you're like getting your hands dirty. You can run that small business from anywhere in the world. Or, well, I'm retired on Social Security. There are countries that are ready to take you. Like, and your income, your Social Security is going to be fine. You don't have to give up your citizenship and your Social Security to move. I was having this conversation last night with my sister, about she's talking about one day if things go certain ways, she'd like to move to Italy. She'd like to go to Italy, and but I don't know how to do that. It's like, let me show you what you can buy in Italy. Like, you could sell this place here and buy 10 properties in the countryside in Italy and turn it into something if you wanted to. There are opportunities that you have to look for. So the biggest thing that I think probably will really hold people back is family, children or parents. That's something you don't have control, or an ex-spouse that won't let you take the children with you, or whatever that situation may be. But when it comes to a career and work, I think there's way more opportunity out there than people realize and see. And I think we need to talk about that more. What can you do? Where can you go? And what are those countries looking for? And by the way, you want to teach English? Almost any country will let you go over there and teach English. Bob.
So I just double checked my stats here because Google will tell me everything. I knew some of these. Malta, Portugal, Canada, Sweden, Bolivia, and Belgium are considered very strong for trans rights. And I've heard Malta mentioned, like, I focus on this, but I hadn't really focused on the island of Malta. Malta's been mentioned to me like 4 times in the last week. Like, maybe I should, it's like one of those pop-ups that come up in your Facebook feed, and maybe, I mentioned I wanted a raincoat, and suddenly there's 17 raincoats in maybe Malta's showing up in my feed for a reason.
Well, and I think that goes to, some of that goes to a very American way. So I grew up in rural Western Pennsylvania, right? Like, rural farm town, an hour outside of Pittsburgh. Yes, very homogeneous, very white, very like you were either like me and you were going to go to college, or you did the tech program and you were going to be a blue collar worker, work on the farm. People didn't move away, right? It was a very different understanding. And I had no actual understanding of world geography. We colored maps. I had no actual understanding. Even when we think about what people are taught, we're not taught about credit. We're not taught about the life skills to be successful as adults. And then we're definitely not taught about a global worldview of benefit other places. You know, this nationalistic, patriotic, and I'm a middle millennial, right? So that's one of those where even at that age, what we were taught, I'm seeing that a lot because a lot of the people that I work with come from small towns. The notion of moving across the world, like they moving to Tampa, moving to a city, moving somewhere else was already bigger than they had conceptualized. Some of these larger moves, it's really never anything that's even entered their mind.
And I want to kind of piggyback off what Callen's saying is, and I have been given consent to share this. Y'all know that I am married to a trans man that is Iranian, first generation American trans man. This is what I do for a living. I help people go to safer areas. Okay. If we try to have this conversation, though, it's completely different because his dad fled from the Iranian revolution, okay, to come here. He's like, you're not kicking my family out. We've already fled once. You're trying to tell an immigrant that already had to flee for a refugee and comes from a refugee family that they're then going to have to leave again? Back to what Bob was saying, the water is going to boil at different points for people. And the water, it's going to get hotter, and people are going to, maybe based off of, again, it's all cultural, it's our upbringing, you know, what are the things that are unique about us that we grew up with that shape how we view things. Because again, you know, I think that if I were married to a white person, would we be having the same conversation? Even though we don't have kids, would they be like, yeah, hell yeah, let's get up and move out of the country or whatever, versus someone that has come here and had to fight? And so when we're talking about those marginalized communities, and especially Black and brown communities where they did already have to flee areas where there was no LGBTQ protection, where there was no protection for women or transgender people or whatever it may be, how do we connect with those people to really be like, are you going to leave? I think that's also something that we should take into consideration is it's easier for white people to move about the world in general. People that, you know, we only know English, and because we're so nationalistic, everyone else in the world has to know English. Okay, so people that come here already know multiple languages. So I don't know. I wanted to bring that up of just talking about different viewpoints that are not currently on this podcast, just because that's not within our realm right now. But yeah,
can I add something to that point?
Absolutely.
I really think that your point about language, and I'm going to add accent. So I just helped a family. So the wife and her parents had fled a South American country years ago. They were here. They did have, well, she had citizenship. I admittedly don't know if her parents did, but I know because she was a seller. So I had to ask that question, right? And she had a non-binary child. So with an X passport. So this was part of it as to what do we do? What decisions do we have to make? But for her, she was like, I'm managing two different things. I'm managing that I'm afraid to speak Spanish in public. She has a very strong accent. You know, she was afraid for she and her parents based on ICE and immigration. And then on the flip side, she's like, and my child has an X passport. So if we leave to try to visit my family, or if we leave to do anything else, we're probably not coming back. And they actually made the decision. So her husband was going to stay, but the country that they were moving back to said, don't do that. Don't do that because we can't guarantee if and at what point it will be hard for him to join you. And they noted that she and her parents kind of all needed to leave at once with their child. And they acknowledge that they don't know if and when they can come back, because even though that child has dual citizenship, if you have an American passport, you have to enter back into America with that passport, and that is the X passport. So just so many layers of pieces that I had not really thought about until they said, hey, we need to sell our house and we're moving in 2 weeks.
Yeah. And there is, you know, to that point, exactly. I have clients right now that they were considering the East Coast. But they're honestly kind of like, we might just go get a work visa somewhere else and just never come back. And so we are going to start seeing people where, again, fire's hot, water's hot. What is going to be that breaking point? It's going to look different for every single person we interact with. And that's why it's so important that we are compassionate, understanding, and that we put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah.
Like our money is with our community. That's where we are going to represent. And so.
Well, and I will add, you know, there was an added level of this one of the child was autistic, and they had planned, the priority was going to be taking the child's stuff, right, to make that transition better, except they were going back to a country that was having true issues with the deportations. So the consulate said, we are handling so many issues with the deportations. We don't know when we will be able to clear a storage container of your things to be brought back into the country. So they were cleared to enter the country with 5 suitcases each. That was it. They said, based on so many of the other deportation and immigration true crimes that were occurring. So it was one of those two of adding in support for an autistic child and not being able to take their things and kind of stack, that I think I talk to people about this a lot because I help so many people who are moving. This isn't a basic referral, right? Talking to realtors, this isn't a referral. This isn't somebody who's like, I got a new job. Come on, Kimber, right? And I think so, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, literally.
Oh, yeah,
So often
absolutely.
people, when we talk about it, people are like, give me the referral, give me the referral. And I'm like, are you prepared to handle what is emotionally happening here? Are you prepared to handle, this is not just, oh, it's an LGBT client, I'm an LGBT person, I've got it. Go ahead, Bob.
I'm dealing with this because having lived in Texas 35 years, when people ask me while we're talking about this, what are you doing? And I start to explain the Proud Boys being at every Pride event with their AK-740, you know, whatever's on their back, and they're just looking at you, trying to, and driving around with all the lifted trucks that have the bumper stickers that tell you who they hate, and just the level of being on the ballot. I end up trauma dumping on people.
Mm-hmm.
I end up having to, you know, hey Bob, who are you? And I'm like, ugh. And they're like, ooh, why are you so political? I'm like, you asked who I am. This is what this is what I live under. And yes, there's true oppression in the world. I shouldn't put that in air quotes. There's oppression in the world that's much worse than this. I get it. But it's the level of stress that we live under, the death threats and the online threats and the stuff like that. And it's just like there's another place out there where I don't have any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a place out there where I don't have that. And I'm like, and I feel bad that I have to, when they ask who I am, I'm like, do you really want to know? Or should I just say hi? Go ahead, Leslie.
And back to your point, Callen. When Bob started Flee Red States, we were like, let's help people.
Mm-hmm.
What we were not prepared for were the horror stories. We had an agent came to us and says, I don't know what to do. Like the stories I'm hearing, like this is a lot. And we were not prepared for that. We knew that, listen, we all knew people who had gone through rough times. Many of us have gone through rough times and had issues, but we thought hey, this is an opportunity to be of service. We did not realize what we were stepping into and how we literally had to adjust. And it was no longer, let me help you find your new space. Like, they share every detail of the trauma that they have and why they're moving. And oftentimes they feel guilty. They have taken this guilt on that's not theirs. They feel guilty about being afraid, wanting to leave, not staying and fighting. And it was really kind of jarring to hear all that. And honestly, at this point, we know the story, and I'm not saying we're a little bit numb to it, but we've heard it over and over again, and doesn't make it easier. But we know what to expect now, and the expectation that it's getting worse.
And to that point, it's getting worse, and it's affecting more things. So for example, I have a couple right now trying to move, and one spouse is a Black trans man who is a veteran, and his wife is a counselor, and she focuses on seeing trans people, most of whom are veterans. Well, nobody could like, they weren't ready for the onslaught of what was going to happen when the military started doing what they were doing to trans service members and vets, right? And I remember having a conversation with them where we were talking about a price change, and when you talk to somebody and they're empty. So it was like, we knew that my client, who was a Black trans man, we knew what he was facing, but to see his wife just say, like, every appointment that I have, people want me to be able to tell them that it's going to get better, and I can't say that it will. Right. And kind of those levels of, I just want people to be aware that if you are not connected to some of the more marginalized parts of our community, really be aware, really do some of that research. And, I struggle a lot in LGBT spaces where I see it all the time, where we'll talk about, hey, trans people are on fire, this group's on fire. And then we'll get a response from a white gay man who says, we're in it together. Kimber's like, right? Like,
that's kind of like a blue state, and I mean a blue state LGBTQ person telling us, don't move, stay and vote. How will we ever overturn this? Literally, this happened at the Alliance one time. I had a very nice, well-meaning gentleman tell me that if I called my congressperson and made an appointment and went in to talk to them about how LGBTQ rights were important, they would listen to me and change their vote. He lived in Nancy Pelosi's district. I don't think that Ted Cruz is going to pick up the phone when I call to talk about LGBTQ issues. But that was his blue state ideology. Just they're gatekeeping whether or not we can move. You shouldn't move. If everybody moves, who will vote this out? Get to a purple state and make it bluer. Get to a blue state and get to safety in air quotes, or get out of the country altogether and get someplace that wants you. Nobody should tell us we can't do this if we need to.
But that's where we need allies and accomplices to do the work, right? You
yes,
can't look at
exactly.
the most marginalized to be the ones who are continually fighting for their ability to live.
And when you mentioned, go ahead, Leslie. I'm just going to reiterate.
And just a reminder, and that we don't judge people who make the choice to stay and fight, stay and be quiet, move what they do, what's best for them. But I've said this before. Bob and I have been friends for over 30 years, and we met at a gay and lesbian youth group where we started there marching, and we got involved in protesting, all those things. And we looked at the people on the Dallas Gay and Lesbian Alliance, and they were long-term activists. Many of them came from ACT UP, and they've been fighting this for 50 years, 60 years. Bob and I have been doing it for over 30. I'll be honest, I'm tired. I thought we made the progression. We got marriage equality. I thought, hey, we're on our way. And it seems like we're going backwards. And I'm not saying I'm not going to fight, but I'm more likely to leave. And I'm lucky enough to have the privilege that I think I can do that. But I don't begrudge anybody who just says, you know what, I'm done. I'm out. I don't begrudge them at all.
I want to also say too, one thing, we need to have more humility in real estate. We say we protect. Okay, I'm just saying we need to have more humility in real estate. We say that we are here to protect people. We see people that, violate the code of ethics, fair housing all the time. But as people that have been shamed, a community that has been shamed for their existence, since most of us have come out, we have been shamed at some point, to then go and shame other people for doing what feels safest for them. Mm-hmm. I am not in any of y'all's shoes. You are not in mine. What feels safe to me is not safe to you. And how can I truly help someone if I am telling them Inherently, their decision to safety is wrong. Who am I to tell someone that they shouldn't worry about their safety? It'll all be fine. So one thing is it's more than the referral. This isn't just, oh, you're working with a client. Like, no, you are having so many different aspects of yourself that they do not teach in real estate school. They do not teach, whenever you go for training, this is what you learn whenever you are working with marginalized communities. You are learning how to listen better. You are learning how to hear better, how to shut the hell up and let other people speak. And only whenever you have been given consent to speak for those other marginalized people should you. That is really my thing, is we just need more humility, because it's so, as someone that has literally been shamed my whole life for being queer in the South, get out if you can. But guess what? As much as there are people that are leaving, there are people that are coming, and people that have been fighting for 30 plus years. I get it. You are tired. Okay. I've been doing it for 15 and I am tired. But they're going to have to burn our house down before we leave. But that's, again, we're having more humility. I know you don't like saying that. You don't like when I say that, Bob, but, we're not going out without a fight. And so, everyone has those different safety levels. So I'm used to riding in the safety up here. Okay.
Well, and Kimber, I think that that's the point too, that real estate's not one size fits all, right?
No.
There's a point that essentially we look at these overarching concepts and we look at, yes, buyers need to be pre-approved or they're paying cash, right? We can talk about things like that, but when we're talking about people, it's never one size fits all. There are never two clients that need exactly the same thing from us. There's never going to be a scenario that plays out exactly the same way, even if it's two houses on the same street, right? So I think that when we add in the human part of it and we add in, take out identity, we can take out all aspects of identity right now. America right now doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Every day there are news stories. People are confused because even the information coming out isn't clear. What is that going to look like in practice? They're saying gas is cheaper. It's not cheaper here. They're saying eggs are cheaper. It's not cheaper here. What's happening with the stock market, right? So we're at a place of discomfort. And when people feel a lack of control, they're uncomfortable. Then if we add in those identity pieces and we add in that extra discomfort of, I don't necessarily know if I'm making the right call, or I don't feel like I'm in control of those scenarios, we have to honor that this is an atypical time for ourselves as a country, atypical times for us as real estate professionals. And if we're really people first and we're serving marginalized communities, this is probably a time that none of us have seen play out exactly in this way. Because Leslie, to your point, you've been fighting a long time, thought we had a lot of these things, and now we don't know where that's going. There really isn't historical data that shows, since COVID, we've really been in an outlier of historical data related to real estate, and then add in the human piece of it. And I think we're all just trying to do our best.
I agree with that. And, so I want to be mindful of everyone's time, even though I'm not the lead on this call. But, Callen, is there anything, we've talked about a lot, but is there something that you really want to say, that there's just a message or anything that we have not touched on that you really want to get out today?
Yeah, I think that the importance is going to be the individual work that we all need to do. Right? So whomever we are, whatever that means for us as professionals, I know that we've mentioned the Alliance and we've mentioned some other entities, and I don't think that we can rely on any of those large entities as being the best option for anybody. I think that we need to hold people accountable. I think that we need to look for people to be doing more of the work. Yes, we need accomplices outside the community, but we need them in the community also, right? And we need to look at ourselves, look at our own identities, look at the way that we show up in the world within privilege and how that may or may not affect the opportunities that we have, and then consider that to those around us. I will just say really short, I did a showing the other day with some immigrants who have been here for 37 years. And he even said, he's like, I can't guarantee that they're going to let me stay in America. So why should I even consider buying a house? Right? I can't tell him he's wrong. That's a very, very real part. He's like, I worked for the county for 35 years, did everything right. I retired 2 years ago. And every time I leave my house, I don't know if I'm coming back. Yeah. So to the individual part of who we are, what work we're doing, what we're considering, and how we show up for other people, I think that that's really my message right now, is that it's not an overarching theme. It's what are we willing to do for ourselves and then for others.
Thank you. Bob, Leslie,
Well
do y'all
put,
have
well
anything?
put. I want to highlight for just a second that there is an organization called rainbowrailroad.org, and they are an organization we're not officially affiliated with, but we obviously love their work. They will help people who do not have the means to get out of bad situations. Okay, so not affiliated with, but sending them all the love and rainbows we can.
I think I saw that IKEA is donating to them. So for every rainbow piece of cake that is purchased right now, they're donating. We're gonna have to fact check it, but somebody type in IKEA Rainbow Railroad. You continue. I'm gonna look it up real quick.
I love cake. Cake is good. I'm not fond of IKEA, but I love cake. IKEA, we love you. Okay, never mind.
Yes,
one
so
of you-
they are donating portion of the money that they make to Rainbow Railroad from the Rainbow Cake.
Yes, and they will help people. Like we had a trans person call from the middle of Texas, scared to death. This is several years, probably about 3 or 4 years ago. When we started as Flee, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
We were holding the first LGBTQ suburban Pride Day in Carrollton. It was hot in June, and Leslie was there, and Kimber was there, and I looked at Leslie and I said, I think I want to start Flee, Texas, because all my friends are talking about where's their plan B. This was a party. It was the first thing that the city did after COVID, like when people could finally come back outside. We gave the city a party, and it was flawless, and it worked. And very quickly, we noticed that Flee, Texas became much larger than Texas. And that's what Leslie was talking about earlier. So we've transitioned to Flee Red States, and we also have Flee United States, because this was just growing. And we got this call from somebody in the middle of Texas who's trans and didn't know, and we don't obviously have the wherewithal to fund that. But I did get online and find that a Greyhound ticket was $300 from the center of Texas to LA. You may not be able to take all your stuff with you. You may have to grab 2 suitcases and go. But if you need to grab 2 suitcases and go, here's a $300 way out. So, and rainbowrailroad.org is apparently doing a great job with that. And God bless IKEA for helping them, and whoever else is as well.
Awesome. Well, we love that. Good plug for the rainbowrailroad.org. They also, because I have their website up, since January 1st, 2021, they have received over 1,149 number of requests for help.
Wow.
Yeah. So very good website. Y'all go check it out. And then Leslie, is there anything you wanted to add before we wrap up?
I don't know, this is kind of sort of off on topic, but I'm not an artistic person. Autistic, not artistic. But can someone create a new rainbow ally flag where the allies crossed out and it says accomplice below it? Could someone do that for me?
I'm sure we can find somebody who can.
Find
We got a
somebody
lot
to do
of,
that for
lot of
me,
powerful
because
artists.
Pride Month is coming up, and I would much rather I would like to see something more like that out there, and people proclaiming to be an accomplice and not just an ally. That's all.
I got
Love
some
it.
ideas for you.
I love it.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here. And we will have a new episode in a couple of weeks. We try to do these every few weeks. So if you're watching our channel, please like and subscribe. And we will be back with more information. By the way, you can find us at fleeredstates.com. LGBTQworldmap.com is also our resource where you can click on the different states, the different countries, and find where you should be and maybe where you shouldn't. And follow us on YouTube. Thanks for being here.